This has been a summer of discontent. Besides military and political crises, the world seems to be rushing towards a climate apocalypse. The mercury is rising in Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. In Spain, over 360 have died due to heat-related causes in 1 week in July. Britain's Luton Airport in London suspended flights after the tarmac on the runway melted. In Indian capital New Delhi, the temperature reached 49 degrees Celsius. In China, the meteorological authorities have issued a high-temperature warning till mid-August.
I'm from Texas, so I'm used to the heat, but this is unreal, just walking in the shade a lot, trying not to get in the sun. Got this bottle of water, and it was completely solid ice about 5 minutes ago. Just trying to stay hydrated, and yeah, it's really hot.
Compared to the 1970s and the 1980s, heat waves were rare, meaning once every 10 years. Now, since the 2010s, we have a recurrence of heat waves and an acceleration that is undeniable. We have almost 1 to 3 heat waves per year.
Erik Solheim calls it a triple crisis of our times.
Climate change, environment destruction, and pollution. Let's use the wisdom of Confucius. We must do it with wisdom, building upon science, doing the right things. Must do it with compassion, bringing everyone on board, also poor people, everyone. And we must be brave, courage. We cannot stop before we have solved this problem.
Let's talk about the issue of climate. 2 years ago, you said at the World Economic Forum that you're confident we can heal the Earth again. Yet we're looking at the hottest summer, not just here in parts of Asia, but across the world. How confident are you now that we can still survive this global warming?
I'm still very confident that we can survive global warming because we have solved major environment issues in the past. Look, 30 years back, the hole in the ozone layer, acid rain were the main environment topics of the day. No one is talking about them any longer because the issues are resolved. The hole in the ozone layer is coming back. There is no acid rain in most parts of the world. And look to China. When China established the People's Republic in 1949, life expectancy in China was about 30 years, maybe a little bit more than 30 years now. Now it's 78. Soon it will pass 80. Look to this enormous progress of development in China and many other parts of the world. Because when we could do these miracles in the past, we can also solve the problem of climate change, even if it's a huge challenge for humanity.
But like you said, different countries are at different levels of development. Some are phasing out fossil fuels, some are barely adopting digital technology, green technologies. How do you see the world in coordinating their actions when it comes to climate change and emission reduction ambitions?
Absolutely, we need to work together as one big family because climate change is an enormous challenge to everyone, to the developed and the developing countries alike. But the good news is that now we have all the win-win policies. There's not a choice between development and environment. We can do both at the same time. We can both improve the economy, create jobs, create prosperity, have a much better life, while at the same time being much kinder to Mother Earth. One example, of course, is solar energy. When we make the switch from coal to solar, not just it's good for the environment, it's also good for the economy. And you're creating more jobs and you save money because solar energy is cheaper and better than coal.
When people prioritize the environment, the perception is they're prioritizing the environment over their jobs, their industries. The outcomes can be unexpected. I mean, if you look at the farmers' protests in Denmark, for example, they're protesting against the environment's plans, the government's plans to cut down on nitrogen oxide and other emissions. This will mean reducing the use of fertilizers, which will hit their livelihoods and their bottom line. How would you balance people's livelihood with environmental priorities?
A green movement needs to be a people's movement. It needs to put people first and people's interest first. But of course, we have a new development model now. The old model, the 20th century, was First, you prioritize economic development, create jobs, and create an enormous pollution on the way. But now in the 21st century, there's no such choice to be made between development and environment, because we can do both at the same time, move very, very fast to protect the planet, while at the same time create jobs and prosperity. And China, of course, is a key example of that. In the last 10 years, China has done fantastically much better on the environment, reduced pollution in all the big cities, cleaned up many of the rivers, planting trees at a large scale. All this is good for the Chinese economy, while at the same time it's good for the planet. China now produces 80% of all the solar panels in the world. It's the dominant wind power nation. It produced 80% of all hydropower last year, and China has 70% of all the electric battery production in the world. All this is good for the Chinese economy, but at the same time, fantastic news for humanity.
Talk about China's dual carbon goals, that is carbon peaking and net zero. How do you see that coming? And perhaps more importantly, what would you see as the biggest challenges along the way?
The biggest challenge is the change in mindset from seeing environment as a cost and as a problem into seeing it as an enormous opportunity for economic development, job creation, and prosperity. And China is doing this, but it's not just China. India, the other big developing countries, is doing exactly the same. Prime Minister Modi of India has put up a green hydrogen mission for India. He is moving into solar energy very, very fast. India is the first all-solar rail station or first all-solar airport in the world. And again, all these are creating jobs for Indians, while at the same time, it's very good news for the planet. And very soon, India will be the second biggest solar nation in the world, next to China.
Environmental protection has become part of China's 5-year plans since 1975. In 2021, China hosted COP15, the UN Biodiversity Summit in Kunming, where President Xi Jinping pledged $230 million to establish a global biodiversity fund. The first 5 national parks have been established to optimize nature reserves. Wild tigers, decimated in Southeast Asia and southern China, have a new lease of life in northeastern China, with their population climbing to 55. Giant pandas, one of the world's most loved animals, are no longer an endangered species. Their number is now over 1,800 from about 1,000 in 1988.
When you talk about the environment, there are so many components of it. For example, biodiversity. That is a thing that is very much associated with our lives. China is very committed to this issue. Last year, there was a major declaration on biodiversity in southern China. How would you rate the efforts of the biodiversity here in China?
I think if you look 10 or 20 years back, there was very limited consciousness on the environment in China because China prioritized economic growth for very understandable reasons, bringing everyone out of extreme poverty. But now President Xi has set a target of another type of growth, more people-centered and more responsible growth. And China is also moving into environment protection at a very large scale. Look to the fishing bans of the Yangtze or the Upper Yellow River. These are huge undertakings, in the short run, painful for some of the people, fishermen living there, but fantastic news for the long-term environment. And when the ecosystems are restored, fish will come back in abundance. China is leading in high-tech protection of nature, like the panda protection in Sichuan. The greening of the desert of Inner Mongolia is the best practice in the world. And some of the green cities, particularly in southern China, like Suzhou or Hangzhou or Guangzhou or Shenzhen, are now among the greenest cities in the entire world. So the rest of the world can learn a lot from China in how to protect nature. In Shenzhen, there is a huge wetlands right in the city center of this mega city. Again, putting the protection of nature first, but for the benefit of the people.
Exactly. I want to talk about your career. There's something very intriguing about your continental shift, if you will, in your career. In 2019, you joined the Green Party of Norway, and saying that the time has come to build a broad Green People's Party that puts the environment first. Why this change?
Because the big challenge of the 21st century is the triple environment crisis. Climate change is real. We have many polluted cities in many parts of the world. And of course we are destroying nature, wiping out animals at a very high rate. This needs to stop. But we have all the policies, all the technologies, and all the finances needed to make that shift. We just need to mobilize a broad global people's movement for the environment. And it needs to put people first, because people are causing the environment problems, but also people are set to benefit from the solution to the environment problems.
You know, when I talk about your the continental shift in your career, I also mean it literally. From Norway, now you're working very closely with China. What has brought you back to this part of the world?
Mainly because I believe that the 21st century is the Asian century. The 19th century may have been the European century, and the 20th the American. In the 21st century, we'll go back to the roots of history. China, India, were the dominant economies in the world. That will happen very soon. Indonesia, by the way, will be the fourth biggest economy in the world by 2050. So we see a huge shift to Asia. And we also see now Asia, governments like the Chinese and the Indian, but also civil society groups and the people moving to the forefront of the leadership in this green shift. No one should blame Asia for the environment crisis. US emissions per capita are 25 times Indians up to this point, 8 times Chinese up to this point. So neither India nor China should be blamed for the climate crisis, but they can take the lead in the shift, and I want to make my very, very small contribution to help making this shift happening.
You know, you've been talking about a great green Belt and Road project. How do you see that coming?
There are many great great Belt and Road projects happening. Look to rail construction as an example. The Trans-Malaysia Railroad is now moving fast forward. Last year, the Vientiane, Laos to Yunnan Railroad was finished. In Africa, I have myself many times taken the Nairobi-Mombasa Railroad. There is the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railroad. There is the railroad in Indonesia from Bandung to Jakarta. Or there is the Hanoi metro system. All these are constructed by China. So it's great for those nations, making mobility better, improving the economies of Laos or Malaysia or Indonesia. But of course it's also fantastic news for the planet, because moving from road to rail or to sea transport is much better for the environment.
I think you're in a unique position to answer this question, given your credentials in the environment, politics, diplomacy. Sir, how would you envision a post-COVID world? What will it look like?
The most important is to remember this old Indian saying, the whole world is one family. If we can bridge the gaps in the world, particularly make China and the United States the two dominant powers of the 21st century, if we can work hand in hand, there's no limit to what we can achieve. We can resolve the economic crisis and bring every person in the world up into prosperity. We can solve the environment crisis, and working together it will also be much easier to solve the military crisis like in Ukraine or in Ethiopia or in Myanmar or in Yemen. Only if we work together we will be able to solve the big issues for humanity in the 21st century. And that's why I call for everyone in China to stop all sorts of anti-American sentiments. And of course, I call very, very strongly on the United States to work closely with China and stop the China bashing, which we so often see from Washington.
Secretary Erik Solheim, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you so much. 谢谢.
Thank you. And that's all we have for this edition of The Hub. Thanks for joining us. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Our news coverage continues. Bye and take care.